The hospital was bustling with the usual sounds of machines beeping, doctors calling out instructions, and nurses moving quickly from room to room. But in one quiet corner, a small delivery room was about to witness an event that would shock everyone who heard about it. Inside, a young couple, visibly nervous and unsure, waited anxiously as the labor progressed. The woman, exhausted and in pain, gripped the sheets tightly while the doctor encouraged her to take deep breaths after hours of intense labor. The cries of 3 newborn babies suddenly filled the room. The triplets had arrived safely, their tiny bodies delicate and fragile. Their skin was soft, their fingers curled, and their eyes squinted against the bright lights of the hospital. The medical team was amazed by the rarity of the situation, as triplets are uncommon and require careful attention. Nurses quickly checked each baby, ensuring that their hearts were beating properly, their lungs were functioning, and that they were breathing without assistance. It was a moment of joy for the medical staff, who often see the miracle of life, but rarely all 3 babies arriving healthy at the same time. Yet amidst this joyful chaos, an unusual tension lingered in the room. The parents, instead of expressing excitement or love, appeared confused and detached. The father avoided eye contact with the babies, while the mother's face reflected anxiety and fear rather than happiness. Staff noticed their hesitation, wondering if the parents were struggling with the reality of caring for 3 infants at once. As the babies were wrapped in soft blankets and placed in the neonatal bassinets, a sense of unease filled the room. No one expected what would happen next. Within hours of the birth, the parents made a decision that stunned the hospital staff. They approached the nurses and, in a calm but distant tone, explained that they could not care for the children. They claimed that raising 3 babies at once was beyond their capacity, that their lives, finances, and emotional energy could not handle the responsibility. The words hung in the air, heavy with disbelief. The staff tried to reason with them, reminding them that these were living, breathing children who needed love, support, and protection. But the parents remained firm, their expressions cold and detached. It became clear that they had already made up their minds. The hospital staff was in shock, unable to comprehend why any parent would leave newborns behind in such a way. Social workers were called immediately, and the news spread quickly through the maternity wing. Nurses whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads, others tearing up quietly. The babies, oblivious to the tension, continued to cry softly, as if sensing the confusion in the room, but unable to understand it. Their tiny hands reached out instinctively, seeking warmth and comfort. But no one could provide it in that moment. The parents left the room without looking back, leaving the triplets in the care of the hospital staff. Security and social workers escorted them out, and the nurses immediately began organizing care for the infants. Each baby was placed in a separate crib to ensure their safety. The staff worked tirelessly to feed them, monitor their health, and provide the warmth that only human touch could give. Meanwhile, the hospital administrators documented the abandonment, contacting Child Protective Services to determine the next steps. The reality of the situation began to sink in. These children had been born into the world, full of potential, yet immediately left alone, needing strangers to ensure their survival. Outside the hospital, the news of the abandonment started to spread quietly, first among staff, then through official channels, and eventually reaching the media. People were shocked and saddened by the story. It was hard for anyone to imagine the emotional turmoil these babies would face in the hours and days ahead. The staff, however, refused to give up, determined to provide the care, love, and attention the triplets deserved. They knew that in these first critical hours, every action mattered for the children's survival and well-being. As the night fell, the hospital room remained brightly lit, filled with the soft sounds of crying babies, beeping monitors, and the quiet determination of nurses. The triplets, tiny and innocent, lay wrapped in blankets, unaware of the world's harsh realities, but in the hands of people who would fight to protect them. In that moment, it became clear that while the parents had abandoned the children, the hospital had become a sanctuary, a place where their lives could still be saved. The shocking act of abandonment marked the beginning of a story that would eventually inspire millions, a story of resilience, hope, and the unexpected power of kindness. It was a beginning no one could have predicted, a moment that would change the lives of these triplets forever. And yet, amidst the sorrow, there was the first glimmer of hope, a tiny spark that promised they would not be left alone for long. The triplets, barely hours old, were now in the care of the hospital staff. Each nurse who approached their cribs felt a mix of sorrow and determination. Knowing these fragile babies had been abandoned at birth, they wrapped them in fresh blankets, adjusted the tiny hats on their heads, and gently placed each one in an incubator to keep them warm. The rhythmic hum of the machines blended with the soft coos and cries of the newborns, creating a strange but comforting soundtrack for the night. Social workers arrived quickly, their faces serious but kind. They reviewed the paperwork, spoke to the nurses, and began piecing together the events that had led to this shocking abandonment. It became clear that the parents had no immediate plans to return, leaving the responsibility entirely on the hospital. Outside the small neonatal room, whispers floated down the hall as staff speculated about the circumstances. Some wondered if the parents had faced financial struggles, while others suspected deeper emotional issues. But no one could fully understand why 3 innocent lives had been left behind. Meanwhile, the babies' cries grew louder, each sound pulling at the hearts of everyone around them. One nurse, a young woman with soft eyes, cradled the smallest of the triplets, gently rocking him as though trying to whisper a lullaby. Another nurse fed the middle baby, carefully measuring each drop of milk to ensure he was getting enough. The third was monitored closely, her tiny fingers twitching as she reached out instinctively for warmth and comfort. The scene was chaotic yet tender, a delicate balance between urgency and care. The hospital administration quickly realized that this situation would require more than just temporary care. Legal authorities were contacted, and Child Protective Services began the process of securing a foster placement. But with triplets, the challenge was even greater. It was difficult to find a family willing and able to care for 3 newborns at the same time. The social workers, however, refused to give up, brainstorming every possibility to ensure the babies would not be separated from each other. They understood that keeping the siblings together was critical for their emotional development and future sense of security. News of the abandoned triplets began to leak outside the hospital, first among local reporters and soon reaching social media. The story struck a chord with people everywhere, sparking outrage, curiosity, and a deep sense of empathy. Online communities debated the reasons behind the parents' actions, while others shared stories of hope and rescue. Donations and offers of support began to pour in, some from strangers who had never met the babies, but felt compelled to help. As the hours turned into a full day, the hospital staff became more like a family to the triplets. They learned each baby's subtle cries and patterns, anticipating their needs before they even expressed them. Lullabies were sung, gentle hands soothed tiny bodies, and the babies slowly began to respond to the warmth and care surrounding them. In those early moments, it became clear that love and attention could heal even the deepest wounds, and that these triplets, though abandoned, would not grow up in neglect. The social workers started preparing detailed reports, documenting every aspect of the situation. They ensured the triplets were healthy, vaccinated, and thriving under the care of the hospital. At the same time, the media attention continued to grow, drawing national interest. Some viewers were shocked, some saddened, but all were touched by the resilience of these tiny lives. Meanwhile, hospital staff held on to the hope that someone extraordinary might step forward to change the babies' future, someone who could offer more than temporary care, someone whose generosity could rewrite the story of their beginnings. By the end of the first day, the triplets had eaten, slept, and even smiled faintly in their dreams. Oblivious to the world they had been thrust into, the staff, exhausted but unwavering, made a silent promise to protect these children, to fight for their future, and to ensure that the story of abandonment would not define them. In the quiet of the neonatal wing, amid the beeping machines and soft whispers, the first chapter of their journey came to a close, but a new, life-changing chapter was about to begin, one that would introduce an unexpected hero into their fragile, yet resilient lives. The story of the abandoned triplets began to spread beyond the walls of the hospital. First reaching local reporters who couldn't resist the shocking nature of the event, the idea that 3 newborn babies had been left by their own parents sparked instant curiosity and concern. Social media soon caught fire, with posts and articles shared thousands of times. The hashtags #AbandonedTriplets and #HospitalMiracle started trending, and people from all over the country were following the story closely. Some expressed outrage at the parents' decision. Others offered sympathy for the struggling couple, but almost everyone agreed that the babies needed urgent help and a permanent home. Inside the hospital, the atmosphere was tense yet hopeful. The staff had grown attached to the triplets in the short time they had been in their care. Nurses rotated shifts to ensure that someone was always near the babies, providing warmth, feeding them, and monitoring their health. Each infant responded differently to the love around them. One of the triplets seemed particularly alert, his eyes following every movement, while another slept peacefully, and the third occasionally whimpered, as if sensing the uncertainty in the air. The caregivers marveled at how, even in these first hours, the babies' personalities were beginning to show. As the media coverage grew, the hospital received calls from concerned citizens, volunteers, and child welfare advocates. Some offered resources and temporary homes, while others simply wanted to donate supplies or provide emotional support. The hospital staff appreciated the kindness, but knew that only a permanent solution could truly change the lives of the triplets. Social workers worked tirelessly, compiling lists of prospective families, assessing their ability to care for 3 infants, and preparing for the inevitable challenges that came with adoption. It was a race against time, as the baby's fragile health and emotional development required immediate attention. Meanwhile, the story captured the attention of influential figures, including philanthropists and social activists. One particular individual, a wealthy businessman known for his charitable work, came across an article about the triplets. He was moved not only by the shocking abandonment, but also by the courage and dedication of the hospital staff. He couldn't stop thinking about the babies, wondering how 3 innocent lives could face such uncertainty at the very start of their journey. Something inside him stirred, a sense of purpose and responsibility that he hadn't felt in years. Back at the hospital, the triplets began to adjust to their new temporary life. They were surrounded by love and care, but the absence of parents left an invisible gap. Nurses often spoke softly to the babies, singing lullabies and narrating stories, as if their voices alone could provide comfort and security. The staff noticed subtle signs of stress in the infants, small tremors, irregular sleeping patterns, and frequent cries, which reminded everyone that abandonment was not just physical. Left emotional scars even in the youngest souls. The hospital became more than a place of medical care. It became a sanctuary, a buffer against the harsh world outside. Outside, the public followed every update with bated breath. Messages of support poured in from strangers who felt connected to the story. Some started crowdfunding campaigns to help cover medical expenses, while others organized awareness drives about child abandonment and adoption. The story ignited a sense of collective responsibility, making people reflect on the importance of empathy, kindness, and action in society. In many ways, the triplets had unknowingly become symbols of hope, inspiring people to think beyond their own lives and consider how they could make a difference. As the day ended, the hospital staff gathered briefly to discuss the next steps. Legal teams were preparing for custody hearings. Social workers were finalizing foster options, and volunteers continued to assist with supplies and care, but in the back of everyone's mind lingered a quiet hope that somehow someone extraordinary might step forward, someone with the means and heart to offer the triplets not just temporary safety, but a permanent life filled with love. The triplets, too young to understand, rested quietly, their small hands occasionally reaching out, perhaps sensing that their journey was about to change in ways no one could yet imagine. By nightfall, the hospital had transformed into a place of anticipation, emotion, and careful preparation. Every staff member knew that the next chapter could arrive at any moment, and the story of these abandoned babies was far from over. The world outside watched and waited, unaware that one individual, guided by compassion and a sense of destiny, was about to intervene in a way that would redefine everything for the triplets. In that quiet, expectant night, the lives of 3 abandoned infants were on the brink of a miraculous change. The millionaire first heard about the abandoned triplets in a quiet moment, scrolling through the evening news on his tablet. The headline caught his attention immediately. White parents abandoned their black triplets at the hospital. He paused, staring at the pictures of the tiny babies swaddled in soft blankets. Their small faces, innocent and vulnerable, seemed to reach out through the screen, stirring something deep within him. He had always been someone who believed in using his wealth to make a difference, but this story struck a personal chord that he couldn't ignore. He called his assistant immediately, requesting all the details available about the hospital, the babies, and the social workers involved. Within minutes, he was on the phone with the hospital administrator, asking questions about the condition of the triplets, their immediate needs, and what legal steps were necessary for someone to step in. The staff, initially skeptical that someone of such influence could intervene so quickly, explained the complicated process of adoption and custody. But the millionaire's determination was unwavering. He insisted that nothing should prevent these babies from finding a loving home. That night, he couldn't sleep, thinking about the triplets, picturing them in the hospital cribs, tiny hands reaching out for warmth, eyes wide with confusion and fear. He imagined the heartbreak of growing up knowing that their parents had left them behind, and he resolved that they would never have to experience that again. In the quiet hours, he began to plan every detail: how to provide them with immediate care, medical attention, and, most importantly, a home filled with love and security. The next morning, he arrived at the hospital quietly. Avoiding the media frenzy, he was greeted by the staff, who now recognized him from the news reports. His presence brought a mixture of hope and disbelief. The nurses watched as he approached the cribs, gently lifting one of the babies into his arms, feeling the warmth of the tiny body against his chest. For a moment, there was silence, broken only by the soft cooing of the infant, and everyone in the room felt the weight of the extraordinary moment. He met with the social workers and legal representatives, expressing his commitment to adopt all 3 triplets. He understood the responsibility involved, and he wanted to ensure that nothing in the process would separate them. The social workers, impressed by his sincerity and resources, began guiding him through the necessary legal procedures. While paperwork and court dates loomed ahead, the babies had already begun to experience a new sense of security, sensing the difference in the energy and warmth around them. As days passed, the millionaire spent time with the triplets, talking to them softly, feeding them gently, and even rocking them to sleep. Though they were too young to understand words, his presence brought comfort and calmness. The nurses noticed subtle changes in the babies. Their cries became less frantic, their sleep more peaceful, and their tiny hands relaxed in response to his touch. It was clear that they felt the safety and love emanating from someone who genuinely cared. Meanwhile, the story of the millionaire's intervention began to circulate, capturing the attention of national media. Headlines praised his generosity, calling it a modern-day miracle. Social media exploded with messages of admiration and hope, and countless people were inspired by the story of someone using wealth not for luxury, but to change the lives of 3 abandoned babies. It was a story that reminded the world that even in moments of heartbreak, compassion could shine through. The hospital staff, exhausted but relieved, watched as the millionaire prepared to take the babies home. Knowing that their lives were about to change forever, they had cared for the triplets during the most vulnerable hours of their lives. But now they could rest knowing that these infants would have a family who could provide love, stability, and opportunities they could never have imagined. In that quiet hospital room, the abandoned babies were no longer alone, and the first real chapter of their new life had begun. By the end of the week, the legal paperwork was underway, and the millionaire continued to visit, spending hours holding the babies, planning their future, and envisioning the life they would lead. The story had shifted from tragedy to hope, showing that sometimes one person's courage and kindness could rewrite the fate of innocent lives. And as the babies slept peacefully in his arms, there was a quiet certainty in everyone's heart that the journey ahead, though still long, would be filled with love, care, and a brighter tomorrow. Even though the millionaire had the means and the heart to care for the triplets, the path to making them as legally was far from simple. The hospital had done everything possible to keep the babies safe, but the law required careful steps to ensure that adoption would be permanent and above board. Social workers and legal teams explained the complex process, including custody hearings, background checks, and court approvals. Each step, though bureaucratic, was essential to protect the babies' best interests, and the millionaire accepted every requirement with patience and determination. The first hurdle was the custody hearing, scheduled within days of his expression of interest. The judge needed to ensure that the triplets would be placed in a safe, loving, and financially secure environment, which the millionaire could clearly provide, yet the paperwork was overwhelming. Dozens of forms and affidavits documenting his finances, home environment, and ability to care for 3 newborns simultaneously. Lawyers worked late into the night, reviewing every detail, ensuring that nothing could delay the process. While tedious, it was a necessary step to make certain the baby's future would be secure and legal. Meanwhile, social workers continued monitoring the triplets' health, documenting every milestone. From feeding schedules to sleep patterns, they reported on the emotional well-being of each baby, noting the changes that had begun since the millionaire had entered their lives. Small gestures, like holding their hands or rocking them to sleep, had already created a sense of safety and trust. The baby's tiny faces, once marked with uncertainty, now reflected subtle signs of comfort and curiosity, as if they could sense that a permanent, loving presence was about to enter their lives. As the legal process progressed, there were unexpected delays, including scheduling conflicts with court dates and questions from authorities about the parents' whereabouts. The hospital staff had no answers, and the parents remained unreachable, leaving gaps in the official narrative. Each delay created anxiety for the millionaire, who worried about the emotional strain on the infants. Yet he remained calm, knowing that patience and persistence were crucial. Every night, he visited the babies, his presence a constant reassurance, and each time, he felt their fragile fingers curl around his own, a silent trust forming between them. In parallel, the story of the triplets' abandonment and the millionaire's intervention began drawing even more public attention. Media outlets interviewed hospital staff and social workers, highlighting the extraordinary nature of the story. Viewers were captivated not only by the shocking start, but also by the hope emerging from such a tragic beginning. Social media posts and messages poured in from strangers offering congratulations, support, and even assistance with baby supplies. The world seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the legal process to confirm what everyone already hoped. These babies would have a safe and loving home. The millionaire, despite his wealth and influence, took the process seriously, respecting the role of social workers and the legal system. He understood that ensuring proper custody was not just a formality, but a foundation for the baby's future. The paperwork, interviews, and home inspections tested his patience, but he welcomed each challenge, knowing that the reward would be 3 lives transformed forever. The triplets, oblivious to the legal drama around them, responded only to love and attention, their tiny gestures and expressions creating a silent reminder of why the process mattered so much. Finally, after days of careful scrutiny and preparation, the court date arrived. The millionaire appeared with his lawyers and social workers, presenting a detailed plan for the baby's care. His sincerity, compassion, and meticulous preparation impressed everyone in the courtroom. And after careful deliberation, the judge approved the adoption, granting him legal custody of the triplets. The moment was both official and emotional, marking the end of one chapter of uncertainty and the beginning of a life filled with love, stability, and opportunity. Back at the hospital, the staff celebrated quietly, knowing that the babies would finally have a permanent home. The triplets, now secure in the knowledge that someone would care for them no matter what, slept peacefully, their tiny breath steady. The millionaire, holding them gently, smiled softly, aware that the road had been long and challenging. But the result, a safe and loving home for these abandoned children, made every obstacle worthwhile. In that moment, it became clear that patience, perseverance, and compassion could overcome even the most difficult challenges, and the lives of the triplets had been forever changed. The day the triplets finally left the hospital was filled with a mix of excitement, nervousness, and joy. Nurses and social workers gathered quietly to see them off. Each of the babies, swaddled in soft blankets, seemed to sense the significance of the moment. Their tiny hands occasionally grasped at the air, as if reaching for the world that was about to open up before them. The millionaire carried them gently, careful to support each fragile body, his eyes scanning the cribs one last time, silently thanking the hospital staff for keeping them safe. As the elevator doors closed, the hum of the hospital faded, replaced by the quiet roar of anticipation. The millionaire's car was waiting outside, specially equipped to ensure the comfort and safety of 3 newborns. The babies seemed to respond to the motion of the car, their cries softening into murmurs. And for the first time, they were on a journey, not toward uncertainty, but toward a home that would embrace them fully. He looked at their faces, memorizing every detail, the curl of their tiny fingers, the softness of their cheeks, the delicate flutter of their eyelids. Every feature was a reminder of the miracle of life and the fragility of innocence. Arriving at the mansion, the triplets were introduced to a nursery carefully prepared for their arrival. The room was bathed in soft, natural light, filled with cribs, mobiles, and shelves stacked with toys and books. The millionaire had spared no effort in creating a warm, inviting, and nurturing environment. Each detail was intentional. The gentle colors, the cozy blankets, the soft lullabies ready to play, designed to provide a sense of security and love. Nurses from the hospital stayed, briefly to ensure the baby's smooth transition, then stepped back, allowing the new chapter of their lives to begin. The first night was quiet yet filled with emotion. The triplets, exhausted from the journey and the whirlwind of events, slept peacefully in their cribs. While they rested, the millionaire sat nearby, watching over them, reflecting on the extraordinary turn of events that had brought them into his care. He gently whispered promises into the silent room, vows to provide not only physical care, but also emotional support, education, and opportunities they might never have imagined. The weight of responsibility was immense, yet he felt an overwhelming sense of purpose and fulfillment. Over the following days, a rhythm slowly developed. The triplets began to respond to routines, to voices, and to the touch of someone who would never leave them. Feeding times became moments of connection. Rocking sessions were filled with soft hums and whispers, and playtime introduced the babies to the gentle joys of discovery. The millionaire marveled at their resilience, noticing little gestures, a tiny smile, a tentative coo, the way their eyes followed him across the room, signs that they were beginning to trust, beginning to feel safe. The staff who had prepared the nursery occasionally visited, offering guidance and support, but it quickly became clear that the millionaire was not just a caretaker. He was becoming a parent in the truest sense, learning to anticipate the needs of the triplets, celebrating each milestone, no matter how small, and comforting them when life felt uncertain. Even the neighbors and friends who had followed the story were amazed at the care, attention, and love poured into the babies. The once abandoned infants were now flourishing under constant, patient, and compassionate care. As the weeks passed, the triplets' personalities began to shine. The eldest was curious, reaching out for objects and showing a fascination with sounds. The middle child was calm, often observing quietly, taking in the world around him. The youngest was playful, responding with little giggles and twitches that brought laughter to anyone nearby. Each tiny action was a reminder that these babies, once left alone in a hospital room, were now safe, loved, and beginning to thrive. By the end of the first month in their new home, the millionaire realized that life had changed in ways he could never have imagined. The triplets, once abandoned, had brought new purpose, joy, and meaning into his life. The house was filled with laughter, coos, and gentle cries, a constant reminder that love, patience, and dedication could heal even the deepest wounds. In those first days, a foundation had been laid, not just for survival, but for a life of hope, happiness, and endless possibilities. And for the first time, the triplets were experiencing the kind of childhood every child deserves. The triplets, now settled into their new home, began to show signs of remarkable growth and personality. Each day brought small but meaningful milestones, from their first coordinated movements to the gentle sounds of cooing and babbling. The millionaire, now fully immersed in their lives, watched every moment with awe, marveling at how quickly the babies were responding to love and care. What had once been three fragile, abandoned infants were slowly transforming into vibrant, curious little beings. Feeding times became more than a routine. They became bonding moments. With the millionaire humming soft lullabies while gently rocking each baby, the triplets began recognizing his voice, their tiny eyes following him across the room, hands reaching instinctively for comfort. Even during the quiet moments, when they simply rested in his arms, there was a sense of connection, a silent understanding that they were no longer alone. Each touch, each glance, was laying the foundation of trust, which had been absent during their earliest hours in the world. As they grew, the millionaire introduced simple play, filled with soft colors, gentle textures, and safe objects for exploration. The baby's curiosity blossomed quickly. One reached for a bright rattle with determination, another giggled at the sound of a soft chime, and the third mirrored the expressions of those around him. Learning social cues and emotional responses, every discovery brought laughter and excitement, reinforcing the sense of joy and normalcy that had been missing from their lives. The home, once quiet and empty, was now alive with energy, wonder, and the sounds of growing personalities. Education, even at this early stage, became a part of their daily routine. The millionaire would sit with them for short periods, reading colorful picture books aloud, naming animals, colors, and objects, and observing their reactions. The triplets responded enthusiastically, turning pages with tentative fingers, pointing to pictures, and occasionally babbling in response to his voice. It was a gentle introduction to learning and communication, showing that even the smallest moments could have a lasting impact on cognitive and emotional development. As the weeks turned into months, the triplets developed distinct personalities, each unique yet complementary. The eldest showed curiosity and leadership, always moving toward new stimuli and exploring his surroundings. The middle was reflective and calm, often observing quietly before engaging, while the youngest was playful and expressive, responding with laughter and smiles that could light up the entire room. The millionaire marveled at how quickly they were developing, and how their early abandonment had not defined them. The love, attention, and nurturing environment were giving them the opportunity to flourish in ways that were once unimaginable. Family routines became a source of comfort and security. Meals were shared, songs were sung, and bedtime rituals became predictable and soothing. The babies began to respond to consistency, learning to anticipate care and affection, which in turn reinforced their sense of safety. The millionaire ensured that every day included moments of closeness, whether it was gentle rocking, cuddles in the morning, or quiet storytelling before sleep. The bond between them grew stronger with each passing day, unbreakable and full of trust. The journey of the triplets also inspired those around them, including neighbors, friends, and staff who had once cared for them in the hospital. Everyone who visited could see the profound transformation that love and attention could bring, from frightened, abandoned infants to lively, thriving babies. The change was extraordinary. The millionaire's dedication was evident in every detail, from the careful monitoring of their health to the patient encouragement of their first attempts at crawling, sitting, and grasping. By the time the triplets reached their first year, their progress was extraordinary. A sense of joy and laughter filled the house every day, and each new milestone felt like a small victory over the hardship they had endured at birth. The millionaire often reflected quietly on the journey, grateful that he had stepped in when he did, and determined to continue supporting them as they grew. It was a reminder that even in the darkest moments, compassion, persistence, and love could rewrite a life. Story completely. And for these triplets, a bright future had finally begun. The triplets had grown beyond fragile infants into vibrant, happy toddlers. Their lives, once marked by abandonment and uncertainty, were now filled with love, laughter, and endless curiosity. The millionaire watched them with a mixture of pride, wonder, and humility, marveling at how far they had come in such a short time. Every smile, every giggle, every small discovery was a testament to resilience and to the extraordinary power of compassion. As the children explored their home, touching toys, pointing at colorful books, and giggling at simple games, it became clear that the trauma of their early hours was fading, replaced by security and trust. The millionaire ensured that their environment was nurturing, stimulating, and full of warmth. He celebrated their unique personalities. The eldest, confident and curious, always leading the way in exploration. The middle, calm and observant, watching and learning from everything around him. And the youngest, joyful and expressive, bringing laughter and light wherever he went. Each child thrived in a way that no one could have imagined just weeks after they were abandoned. The story of the triplets began to inspire people far beyond their home. Articles, interviews, and social media posts highlighted not just the shocking abandonment, but the remarkable intervention that saved their lives. Many readers and viewers were moved to tears, reflecting on the contrast between neglect and care, despair and hope. It became a story of human kindness, showing that one person's actions could ripple outward, changing countless lives in ways unseen. The millionaire, however, never sought fame or recognition, focusing entirely on giving the children the life they deserved. In quiet moments, he would sit with the triplets, gently holding their tiny hands, reading their favorite books, or telling stories in soft, warm tones. They responded instinctively, cooing, laughing, and reaching for him as if they knew he would never leave. It was a connection that had developed over months of patience, love, and consistency. One could see in their eyes that they felt safe, cherished, and understood, and that their early abandonment no longer defined their future. Friends and family who had witnessed the journey often remarked on the miraculous transformation from the hospital, where their cries echoed through empty rooms, to a home filled with laughter, music, and tender care. The contrast was extraordinary. Each milestone, whether their first steps, first words, or simple gestures of affection, was celebrated, not just as a developmental achievement, but as proof that love could heal even the deepest wounds. The millionaire himself felt that each small success was a reminder of the responsibility and the privilege of changing lives. Even as the triplets grew, the story remained a source of inspiration for many, a narrative of hope in a world that often seemed indifferent, reminding people that tragedy could be met with compassion, that lives could be transformed when someone chose to act rather than turn away. Charities, social workers, and advocates for abandoned children cited the story as an example of the difference one individual could make, spreading a message that kindness and intervention were more powerful than despair. The millionaire, reflecting on the journey, often thought about the fragile babies in that hospital room and how quickly their fate had changed from the moment he stepped in to the long legal processes to the nurturing care he provided daily. Every action had mattered. And now, years later, he could see the tangible results of love and dedication. The triplets were thriving, healthy, and full of joy, a living testament to what could happen when someone refused to give up on life. In the quiet of their nursery, filled with sunlight and laughter, the story of abandonment had finally turned into a story of hope, resilience, and love. What had begun as heartbreak ended in triumph, and the triplets, once left alone in the world, now had a future filled with endless possibilities. Their lives were proof that even in the darkest beginnings, miracles could happen, and that compassion, courage, and determination could rewrite destinies. for anyone who witnessed their journey. It was a reminder that no life was too small to change, and no act of kindness was too minor to make a difference.